Hi Year 10, hope you're all okay and you're all doing well. I thought what I'd do is go through this extract, annotate it with you like we would usually do in lesson, and then you should have some ideas that you can add to your own sheets. What might be quite a good idea for now is for you to actually go through it, start thinking about your own initial ideas, and then press play on this video so that you can copy down the additional points that I'm hopefully going to bring to it. Now, really annoyingly, I left my visualizer at work, so if this is really shaky, I do apologise. I've got no other way of doing it other than holding it by my hand. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing that we find out is that we are introduced to the boy with fair hair. I'll read through the extract for you. Who lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way towards the lagoon. Though he had taken off his school sweater and trailed it now from one hand, his grey shirt stuck to him and his hair was plastered to his forehead. All round him, the long scar smashed into the jungle was a bath of heat. He was clambering heavily among the creepers and broken trunks when a bird, a vision of red and yellow, flashed upwards with a witch-like cry, and this cry was echoed by another. So we're going to do two things when we're looking at this. Obviously, we've got the first character, who I'm hoping we all know by now is Ralph. And then we're also going to have a look at how the island itself has been described. There's some really, really interesting language here, which I know you will have come across from the first booklet that you did. For example, the long scar smashed and this vision of red and yellow with the bird that cries with a witch-like cry. And I think all those sorts of details are really important for this extract. So we're going to get started right at the top with the boy, okay? So the fact that he's called the boy with fair hair. Boys typically, and we will put this down as well, while we're using the word the boy rather than the man, has got connotations of innocence. I'm going to write that one for you. So connotations of innocence. And if we think about the word fair, we also get that idea from there as well. So the word boy has that, and we're also going to do this link here. So that links to fair. Okay, now if we're thinking about something being quite fair, we're thinking about the innocence of it, but we're also thinking the boy with fair hair. Well, he's not actually been called a name at the beginning. Normally, if you open a book, you've got the name of the character. So the fact that he doesn't have a name and he's called to begin with the boy with fair hair, and if we remember from reading the book, I think it was about the first 3-4 pages of the book, he is called the fair hair boy. That was his name, the fair boy. It is interesting and it is important to identify this. So we're going to put a little comment on here. So the boy with fair hair, well, this shows that he, that there's a kind of almost a lack of identity through this lack of a name. Okay. We're also focusing on his appearance. I'm going to move the camera. And if we remember when this was written, we're talking about the 1950s. Well, World War II had only just really finished. People knew what the Nazis had done in Germany. People were aware of these concentration camps. And actually what the Nazis did was that there was a very much a focus on people's physical appearance to help decide whether they were, whether they were going to be saved, whether they weren't, what sort of ideas are coming from that. So this focus on appearance actually is a link to Nazi Germany. And we can talk about that today as well, can't we? We can think about, how we still... This isn't something that disappeared after World War II. We are still living in a world where appearance is important. If you think about social media and you think about celebrities who make their money off this, it is all based on this idea of appearance being really, really important. We've also got something else that we can write down about this idea. So yes, we've got this idea that he's, the lacking of identity. We've also got, if we have a look again at this word fair, so we've kind of said that it's innocent, but we've got something else that we can add in here. If you're a fair leader, you're relatively kind of democratic in your leadership. So you're allowing other people to have that talk. You're not going to decide on one thing by yourself. It's very much, like it says, fair. So this could reference his democratic, and I'll put there, fair style of leadership. And look how much we've got from one opening sentence with literally the boy with fair hair. That's it. And we've got something else we can put down as well. Hair. Now, I don't know if any of you noticed this while you were reading Lord of the Flies, but hair. If you think about hair now, and I know we're in lockdown, week 5, I think it is now. So there are lots of people who haven't been able to go to the hairdressers, and you can see that that hair, grows over time. And a mark of civilization is actually being able to get your hair cut. And it's that sense that the boys are lacking this civilization. And the fact that he's described through his hair at the beginning really helps us to understand the importance of hair throughout the rest of the novel. So I'm going to put that down here. So hair is a symbol, or becomes a symbol, for the breakdown of civilization. So as the boy's hair grows, that shows that they're losing this grip on civilization. And hair doesn't really stop growing that much. I mean, eventually it might do, and it's incredibly, incredibly long, but it's almost unstoppable with the way it grows, especially when you're unable to get it cut. So I'll put this down here. The hair grows, and it kind of, it is unstoppable, like the boy's growing violence. The boys' violence starts off, and they're not violent. They're just normal boys. They are behaving in the way you would expect boys to behave. As time goes on, their violence grows. You remember what happens with Jack and the pigs, and even Ralph and Piggy get involved in the killing of Simon. All of that shows that these boys, their violence is growing, and it's mimicked through the hair. So that focus on hair to begin with is important. Right, the next bit we want to talk about is this bit here where it says, though he had taken off his school sweater. So it shows he's taken it off, this sweater. Now the link to school is, is order and civilization. So represents order and civilization. In a civilized society, you have schools, you have this sort of environment. And he's taken this off. So his school clothing, Ralph's school clothing, is unsuitable. Okay? So his school clothing itself becomes really unsuitable for the life that he's living at this moment. It becomes unsuitable for what's actually happening. And if we continue on here and trailed it now from one hand, his grey shirt stuck to him. The word grey really stands out here, especially if you look at the contrast a little bit later, a vision of red and yellow. This island is described with all of these brilliant colours. Grey is actually sticking out as being something that is, relatively boring, relatively orderly in it. So we've got this contrast that's being created, contrast in colour. So is it any surprise that they, break out of civilization when you've got this contrast that happens at the beginning, this fact that the colour itself is grey and is being described in that way. So this contrast in colour is actually really important, like I said, because of the civilization that's being represented, and then this contrast to the island itself, which is full of, full of belief and full of life, effectively. And it's almost showing civilization to be something quite boring, which is effectively what the boys do, don't they? They start to think that life could be better, with them being more free, and it's this really, really, really difficult divide and tension between the two. So let's keep going. I think that's quite a lot of good things to talk about in terms of how Ralph has been described from the beginning. I don't think I've got anything else on here. Now let's continue, because you've got some fantastic quotations. The one I really want to focus on is this one that says, the long scar smashed into the jungle. Now, what this is talking about is actually talking about the shape that was created when the plane landed. I will attempt to draw a picture. You know how my drawings go. So there's your plane. Looks a little bit like a bird, but then that makes sense. And when it crashes onto the island, you've got this great big kind of almost scar that's been cut into the island from where the plane has actually landed. And it destroys the island effectively. It destroys part of this island. And that's what's happening here. Should we put some little, there we go. Now it looks like a plane, or not. So it destroys part of the island. Now, the plane is technology and civilization, isn't it? If we think about it. So that is civilization. And the island is nature. Now, we know this from all the poems that we've looked at. What is the effect of man when it comes to nature? Well, man destroys nature effectively. Man is often overpowering nature. If we think about how how Bayonet Charge shows that, how nature is thrown up into the air by this war. Bayonet Charge is actually a poem that really helps us to understand the effect that war and violence has on people inside. So we know now what the scar is actually about. Now let's look at the words that are being spoken about. So that's what's literally being suggested. The long scar. So this is the effect of it, and it's also talking about the fact that almost because it's long, there is no escape from the destruction of humanity on nature. And on society. So it's definitely showing that, humanity is destructive. So long shows you how this is, there's almost too much of it happening. Scar smash. Now let's have a look at this bit. So we've got our image. Hopefully you've all drawn a better image than I have, if you wanted to. So we've got a technique here. Remember what we've spoken about before when we've gone scar smashed? Well, we've got that letter, that sound really coming through here. So it becomes sibilant. So we've got sibilants used. And what that sibilance does is it actually makes it sound like the actual violence itself. So you actually almost hear, so the reader hears. And I'll put there because you don't actually physically hear it, but it's almost like when you're reading it, the long scar smashed almost becomes onomatopoeic. The reader hears the violence, so it really exaggerates that violence that has been committed here by humanity. Scar becomes a metaphor, so we'll put here scar, metaphor for the destructive nature of humanity. And scar itself, if you have a scar, it's symbolic of wounds and hurt. So it's almost like the island itself is hurting. It's being attacked by civilization. And if we think about it, humanity does have that impact, doesn't it? If you think about the amount of times that sort of conversation is pulled up, even in the news, and about the impact that humans have on nature and on the planet, and you think about global warming and everything else that's going on, those sorts of things all tie in with what we've got here. It's all about this idea that actually humanity is attempting or trying or succeeding in certain cases in destroying what's there. And I think that's the sort of idea and the messages that we want to get from this sort of description anyway within the novel. And let's continue with this line. It says, Scar smashed into the jungle was a bath of heat. Now, a bath of heat, it's this sense of it being almost submerged. There's no escape. So we'll put that here, submerged in heat. And jungle, if we think about jungle, we think of savagery, don't we? In terms of, a lack of, it's quite hostile. And we can add that to there as well. Okay, so we've got submerged here, but submerged in heat. We've got hostile and savagery for the word jungle. And you can add your own notes to this as well. I'll just try and get through this quickly. He was clambering heavily among the creepers. So this shows that his movements are not, that this is something that's actually quite difficult and challenging for him. The environment is not working in his favour. The creepers, if we think about creepers, we might want to look at things, that are possibly quite, things that are hostile and alive. I mean, we're talking about vines here. But very much he's struggling to get through them. So it's almost like the island itself is hindering his progress. We've got that there. And then we've got this brilliant bit here. When a bird, a vision of red and yellow. If you think about red and yellow, they're typically your kind of danger colours, aren't they, even? So typically danger colours. / warning colours. Which could suggest like this future harm that might come to the boys. And then witch-like cry. So we've got a lovely simile here to describe the cry that is being heard from this bird. And the witch-like cry is actually, witch-like. If we think about all the ideas that we've got about witches from Macbeth and what we looked at with that, it's danger and evil. And so we've got a sense of foreboding here. Something bad is going to happen. And because we've all read the book, and hopefully now you'll all read the book twice, once in year 9, once now. But we've definitely got this idea that actually we know things aren't going to go well on this island. We know it's not going to end up like some of the other adventure islands in some of the other literature that you might have looked at. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be a brilliant ending. And we know that Lord of the Flies doesn't end fantastically. It ends with a sense of things not being resolved. And actually this witch-like cry at the beginning, it reminds us that there is evil and there is danger. But the evil and the danger isn't the island. The island isn't actually the thing that's at fault for that. Remember, it's the boys themselves. It's humanity. It's the fact that there is really very little innocence. And that matches what people probably thought at the time. Imagine you had just experienced World War II and you had found out what had happened in Germany. You'd found out about the concentration camps and you'd found out about all the things that had happened during the Russian Revolution, during Stalin's rule. Wouldn't you too feel that there was no innocence left? Wouldn't you too feel that there was no kind of escape from any of this? So it's all these sorts of ideas that are really important to just put in here. Hopefully on your own, you'll have started to look at maybe some of the verbs and thinking about the impact of those. But I just thought I'd go through some of the key main points that identify that, yes, the island is described as hostile to begin with, but it's not just the island. The island itself doesn't become hostile later on. And hopefully that helped. So I will put this up in a second, and then I will also a little bit later annotate the second extract that you have all been given, which is this one here. It's your longer extract, and that one's definitely this description of picking up on Ralph as well as a character, but also very much about this island and how the island has been described and looking at the words and choices of that. Okay, right, speak to you soon.